Okay, welcome everybody to Protecting Scavenging Eagles from Vehicle Strikes. I'm joined today by field biologist Jessica Taylor. Jess, will you take it away?
Hi, thanks, Kirsten. Um, I will go ahead and share my presentation. Again, thank you for joining us for protecting scavenging eagles from vehicle strikes. Kirsten, can you see my screen and hear me okay?
I can. Thanks, Jess.
Wonderful. Um, yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to have all of you here to learn a little bit more about what Hawkwatch is doing to protect scavenging eagles. And I'll go ahead and just start by telling you a little bit more about myself. This is me. My name is Jessica Taylor. I'm a field biologist at Hawkwatch International. I have kind of a fun story with Hawkwatch. I started out working the migration sites in 2014. And I worked 7 full seasons. So this photo here is me releasing a golden eagle from the Chelan Ridge Raptor Migration Site. That's one of Hawkwatch International's sites across the West. And yeah, so I did that for 7 seasons. And then in 2017, I started doing work as a field technician, working with some road surveys, looking for raptors, and some eagle nest surveys. I also worked as an eagle sentinel at a wind farm. And after doing that for a few years, also working on the Eagle Vehicle Strike project with Hawkwatch International, I became full-time staff in 2019, where I've been for 2 years, and the project coordinator for Eagle Vehicle Strike. So it's been a really great journey for me, kind of growing as a biologist with Hawkwatch International. And yeah, so I guess I'll start by talking about eagles in general. We have 2 species of eagles in North America, golden eagles, which is the one shown right here, and then in the title slide here, this is a bald eagle, which most people are really familiar with. It's got the white head and the white tail. And yeah, so both of these birds and raptors in general are opportunistic feeders. So they'll eat pretty much whatever they can. They'll eat rabbits, prairie dogs, snakes, other birds. We've seen some pretty weird stuff in eagle nests. So, but another thing that people may not know is that eagles are also scavengers. So they will, especially in the winter time, they'll eat birds that, or sorry, the carcasses that they find on the side of the road. You know, it's kind of like a buffet for them. It's easy pickings. And a lot of their regular prey, like prairie dogs, for example, or ground squirrels, are going to be hibernating in the winter. So their normal prey source isn't going to be as readily available. And so they like to take this opportunity to find some easy food. And a lot of times we'll actually see eagles that'll be perched on telephone poles alongside of a road, just waiting for rabbits to get hit. And as soon as a rabbit gets hit, they know the hot spots and they'll swoop down and get that easy food. And so that's how well, that's, I guess, what attracts birds to the side of the road. They're hungry, and a lot of, you know, as everybody I'm sure have seen, deer on the side of the road, or raccoons or rabbits. And so that's what attracts eagles to the side of the road. But how do we know, I guess, that eagles get hit by roads? A lot of people ask me, like, oh, you know, eagles are pretty smart, or I've never seen an eagle near a road. Why would they, what's going on there? And what kind of alerted us first was, for one, just finding eagles on the side of the road that have been hit by cars. We might have partners that have reported them to us, or we might be going out to do some other nest surveys and come across a dead eagle on the side of the road. And sometimes we'll see that they're next to like a jackrabbit carcass. So we suspect that they were eating the jackrabbit carcass and then unfortunately got hit by a car. So what'll happen is they'll be eating a carcass and then they'll get spooked by a car. But these cars are traveling fast a lot of the times, and that isn't really something that we see in nature very often, something traveling, 60, 70 miles per hour, this giant boulder-sized thing. So they don't really know how to respond to it all that well. And then another reason that kind of alerted us to this being a problem is our transmitter studies. So we deploy transmitters on golden eagles at Hawkwatch International. So on the left here is a transmitter, and there's a pencil for size comparison. They're solar powered. I guess for people who may not be familiar with what animal tracking through GPS technology looks like, we deploy these transmitters, and then they have this antenna, and they send a signal to a satellite, and then we, from our computers in the office, can download that data. And we can say like, oh, our eagle is in Arizona or Wyoming, so we know where they are. But if that signal stops moving for a few days, and we're like, oh, that eagle's been in the same spot for a little more long than I'm comfortable with, then we'll go investigate that. And sometimes they do pick them off. And then other times it's unfortunately a mortality event. And so some of our transmitted birds were getting hit by cars. And so we're, kind of thinking like, what's going on here? And, just how big of a problem is this? And then on the right here, that's a golden eagle nestling. It is in a nest, and it has a little backpack on. So I'll just, if you can't find it, it's right there. Yep, so we just put this on, and then they'll carry it around for pretty much the rest of their life, in most cases. So one of the things we want to look at is why is this important? Why does it matter that eagles are getting hit by cars? Deer get hit by cars all the time. We see raccoons, maybe possums, depending on what part of the country you're from. And why does it matter that eagles get hit by cars? Well, eagles are long-lived species, and there aren't as many of them. So if you think of something like rabbits, right? Like there might be tons of rabbits where you are. When they have lots of babies every year. And so maybe like losing a few of them to a vehicle incident may not be that big of a deal, but something like an eagle, they live a really long time. There aren't that many of them, and they usually only have 1 or 2 nestlings a year. And so at best, the eagle population in the country is stable and very possibly declining. So anytime we can find an area where we can help conserve or help mitigate some of these mortalities, then we would like to do that. So, and another reason that this is an issue is like just talking about urban encroachment on wildlands. So these are some eagle nests. They're circled here for you because I'm sure they'd be really hard to point out otherwise. So this is the kind of habitat that they live in and nest in. And I can show, yeah, here's an up close picture of an eagle nest. And there's a little eaglet inside of it as well. So just, they don't really tend to live in urban areas, partially because these landscapes aren't in really urban areas. And also they just tend to be pretty wary. So with urban encroachment and lots of different construction going on, like their habitat and their living space is also just getting smaller and smaller. So the next question we want to ask, thinking about eagle vehicle strikes, is how big of a problem is this? Are we seeing 1 or 2 eagles get hit by cars? Is it maybe not that big of a deal? So in order to do that, we've got our study areas here. So the project on the left was a 3-year-long study that Hawkwatch International did in 3 different states, in Oregon, Wyoming, and Utah. And on the right here is a more intensive study in Wyoming that we've been doing for the past 2 years. So how these work is we basically look at roads and we want to target roads that we think eagles are going to get hit at. So those are going to be roads with higher speed limits. So probably like 55 miles per hour and above. If they're much less than that, then there isn't really as much of a risk that animals are going to get hit by cars, because either the animal will see them or the people who are driving the vehicles will see them, and the risk is less. Also, like a moderate to moderate high amount of traffic. If there's too much traffic, eagles tend to avoid the roads. But if there's not enough traffic, then again, there isn't quite as high of a risk just because there aren't as many cars. Excuse me just a second. So the crews will go out and they'll just drive these roads, right? Because in order to figure out how many eagles are being killed by cars, we have to go out and actually find them and look at, you know, which is harder than it sounds. We kind of go out and we drive them, hoping to find, well, we hope not to find dead eagles, but, you know, hoping that we can at least get a good handle on how bad the problem is. So we go out, we drive about 40-ish miles an hour on these roads, and we're looking for prey, so live prey, and also deer carcasses, rabbit carcasses, anything we think that eagles might eat, and we record those. We're also looking for live eagles. So we want to know where the live eagles are and where the prey is, and then it follows that that's generally where we see the eagle mortalities, which makes sense. And that's intuitive. So it's nice when the data kind of confirms your intuition. And then we also had more intensive walking surveys where we would walk a few miles of the road transects and see what we could find when we were walking. And as you can imagine, when you walk the side of the road versus when you're driving 40 miles an hour, you find a lot more. And then for our more intensive survey, this is 650 miles of road in Wyoming, and we wanted to do the whole thing, all of it. So driving it, and as you can imagine, walking 650 miles of road was not very practical. So we did that on ATVs to see what we could find. And then after looking at what we were seeing on roads, we identified, you know, well, we do see eagles out here, both dead and alive, and we're seeing lots of roadkill and prey. But what we want to know is how the eagles are responding to that. So we're putting cameras. This is a camera trap deployment. We try to hide them so they don't get stolen. And we put them on prey that we think that eagles might eat, and hopefully catch some interactions and take some notes and parameters on that, and I'll explain that a little bit later. And then we also put them on eagle carcasses, because part of this project is that, you know, you can drive around and you may or may not see an eagle, but we want to know how long those eagle carcasses are persisting in the environment. Because if we're driving these every 2 weeks and eagles tend to disappear after maybe being out for a day, we're going to be missing a lot of them. And that's what we found, is that we are probably very much underestimating the likelihood or just how many eagles are getting hit by cars, because they actually tend to disappear very quickly. And part of the reason, so this is something that we had on camera, so you can see there's an eagle. That's unfortunately an eagle that was hit by a car and is no longer alive. And so we put a camera on it to see how long it would stay there. And this person just took the eagle carcass. So, and that happens quite often. Sometimes they'll take, there'll be agencies, so things like Department of Transportation or Fish and Wildlife will take them. But a lot of times it's just like a random person that sees an eagle on the side of the road and is like, ooh, I want that. So just so you know, that's super illegal. If you see an eagle on the side of the road, actually, this is a good time to talk about this. If you see an eagle carcass on the side of the road, don't touch it, don't move it, don't take it, just leave it where it is. And you can call either your state fish and game department, or you can call highway patrol and let them know that you found an eagle, a dead eagle on the side of the road. If it's alive and it looks injured, you can call your local wildlife rehabilitation center. And hopefully that never happens. I hope you never come across any situations like that, but if you do, that's what you'll do. Our winter crew this year actually came across an eagle that had a broken wing, and they were able to capture it. They were experienced at handling eagles. I should throw that in here. So, and they took it to the Teton Raptor Center, who was able to rehabilitate it and release it back into the wild. So that is a big success story from our team. So once we put these cameras up, we're looking at a few different parameters. So what we want to know is basically flushing behavior. So as I described earlier, they'll be on a carcass, they'll be really focused on eating, and then a car will come by and it'll spook the eagle and they'll flush off of it. So we want to know how many flushing events there are. How long are their feeding bouts? So are they staying on the carcass for several minutes or several hours? How many chances do they have to get hit by a car? How many cars are coming by on that road? How far away is the carcass from the road? And we're taking in all of this information to hopefully inform us on how we can manipulate or move these carcasses to save eagles. And also how long a carcass is going to last in the environment. That's something that I found really interesting. And that depends on the weather, largely. As you can imagine, if it's like a really hot, sunny day, they don't tend to last very long. But if it's very cold, it's like keeping them in a freezer. And we had one carcass it was a deer in Oregon, and it had gotten hit by a car. We put a camera on it. Some eagles came and ate it for about a week, and then it got covered in snow. And then after the snow melted, 2 months later or so, the eagles came back and started eating it again. So they, one carcass could potentially be months of hazardous time for an eagle. And then we have these wonderful volunteers and interns that go through these photos with the set of parameters that I just talked about, and they spend a lot of time going through every single photo that we've collected, and I thank them a lot for doing so. So this is an example of an eagle flush. There's a car here, and it looks like it's flying luckily away from the car. But these are it's pretty common that we get photos like this captured on camera. And that, the eagle and the car are pretty close to each other. So that eagle didn't have a lot of time to think about oh, I'm going to flush because this car is approaching. It kind of just spooked it. Here's another one where it looks like the carcass was kind of obstructed by vegetation a little bit. So there's a good chance the eagle didn't even see that semi at all. And here we have a few different eagles and also some magpies, and they're flushing away from this car, which you would think is what they do most of the time. Right, so it's oh, well, all of these birds look like they're flushing away from the carcass, so how big of a deal is this really? Well, I have another example. Did I skip one? Yeah. So here's a car approaching. There's an eagle on the carcass, and then an eagle that's flushed, and it's going right in front of this car, and it was it's such a near miss. I'm going to go through that again. So that's, we've had a lot of these in our photos, and that's really scary. I've yet to have either myself or a crew member come up to a carcass that we've had a camera on and find an eagle carcass. But again, with, you know, how fast they disappear, who knows? So the result of all of that, their flushing decreases significantly when the carcass is 10 or more meters away from the road. So when we talk about things like management implications, if we just move them 10 meters off the road, then they still get to have their winter food resource, right? Because, you know, intuitively you might think, well, why don't we just pick up all of these deer carcasses? We probably don't want them on the side of the road anyways. But then really we're taking some food away from them that could potentially be a very, very important food resource. So if we just move them, and it's also easier because you don't have to dispose of a carcass, but if you just move them 10 or more meters off the road, then they won't flush as much. And if they don't flush as much, then they don't have as many chances to get hit by a car. So what we've also found, after doing these initial 3-year studies where we put cameras on roadsides, we started moving deer away from the road, or we'll also do antelope as well. And so we want to move them what we consider like a safe distance from the road. So that'll be like 50 to 200 meters off the road, where we're like, okay, if they're here, like there's no way they're going to get hit by a car. And really what we found is that there's more eagles on each carcass. They stay there for longer. They don't flush off as much. They might interact with each other. We've seen some like pretty epic eagle battles on carcasses. And the most we've seen on carcasses is 12 eagles at once on one carcass, which I think is pretty impressive. That, I mean, that one deer or antelope is feeding, you know, 12 eagles, and that's really great. And that's like, the thing that I love about this is it's like such a clear and simple thing to do. It's like, oh, we just like move them 10 meters off the road. And what we started doing in our more intensive 2-year study is actually where we have treatment areas and we also have control areas. So about half our study area, we're moving carcasses 10 or more meters off the road. And in the control areas, we're just leaving them there. You'll have to stay tuned on that one because the data is still coming in. We just finished our second winter season on that. So yeah, stay tuned on that, and hopefully we'll have some more information to share soon. And then I just want to throw this up. It takes a lot of people to make projects like this work, and these are some of our partners that we've worked with who have helped us on the Eagle Vehicle Strike projects. And then this is just a list of those wonderful field technicians and photo review volunteers and interns that this project would not be possible without them. Yeah, and thanks. I think I'm a few minutes early, but
that is A-okay. Thanks so much, Jess. We've got some questions coming in, and Melissa is settling in the Hawkwatch education room with Chris, the Golden Eagle. So as Melissa's settling in, maybe let's take a couple of questions. First, kind of getting back to a more foundational concept here, Jess. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference in habitat between where bald eagles nest and golden eagles nest?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is some overlap, but bald eagles are going to be mostly near water sources. We see them a lot on the coast, and they also nest in trees a lot of the time. And golden eagles will also nest in trees, but they're primarily cliffs, and it's like a lot of desert area, and it's much drier where golden eagles nest.
Great. And since we have just a few more minutes, we told Melissa we wanted her to be ready at the 30-minute mark. Another person said that they volunteer at a Utah Wildlife Rehabilitation Center and typically see multiple bald and golden eagles with vehicle strikes each year. Most are without bands or transmitters. So they were wondering if we ever reach out to wildlife rehabilitators with this project. And, if this study is limited to banded, transmittered eagles or if it's all eagles.
Yeah, so it is all eagles and all partners. So, we, especially what we're doing right now in Wyoming, we've reached out to a lot of partners. So our Utah portion, we ended about a year and a half or 2 years ago. But yeah, in Wyoming, we reach out to partners, whether it's like law enforcement or Fish and Game, Department of Transportation, and also like the wildlife rehabilitation centers up there, and ask them if they're willing to share that data with us. And it's all eagles that we're looking for. So we go out there and we drive and we are looking for every single one of them that we can find.
Great. Melissa, are you ready for us now with Chris? I'm going to make Melissa the presenter for a moment.
Everyone,
Oh, hang on one second,
project.
Melissa. You got muted for
Sure.
just a second. If you want to start over.
No problem. I'm sure you've all enjoyed hearing about this Eagle Vehicle Strike project. I think it's one of the coolest things that we do at Hawkwatch. My name is Melissa Halverson. I'm the Education and Outreach Director here. And I'm sure you're much more interested in hearing about my colleague than you are about hearing about me. So I would like to introduce you to Chris. He is a golden eagle. And Chris is actually the victim of a vehicle strike. So he's a pretty special bird. He, in that vehicle strike, injured his wing. So I'm actually going to hold him up and see if he'll open his wings for you. And you can see that, okay, you can put it down now. You can see that left wing, he can't extend that all the way. So he's the muscles in his chest for that wing have atrophied. He's not really able to fly. And of course, for an eagle, being able to fly is a really important skill so that they can hunt. Chris, because of that injury, is not able to be released into the wild. So like all the raptors that we call our raptor ambassadors here at Hawkwatch, he is non-releasable. He's not a pet. He is not a tame animal necessarily. He is a wild bird that we have a special permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that allows us to use him for education. So the thing like we're doing today is part of his job now. So we consider him a coworker, a partner. We call our birds raptor ambassadors because they really are ambassadors for their species. And so Chris is one of the lucky birds. Despite having that vehicle collision, he survived. It just kind of clipped that one wing. He was taken to a wildlife rehabilitator and deemed unreleasable. So he's actually about 20 years old, and we've only had him at Hawkwatch for about 3 or 4 years. He was lived with a wildlife rehabilitator for many years, and then we were able to acquire him to use for education programs. So he went a couple years without being handled. So he's a bird that is still learning a little bit about how to do that. He's really talkative and fun, and he might start playing his favorite game, which is to pick at the leash that's wrapped around my fingers here and pull it all off the glove. He likes to do that. But the cool thing about that, you can see when he bows his head, that beautiful golden nape that gives golden eagles their name. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the species. I don't know how much Jess might have covered about golden eagles in general, but they are one of 2 eagles that are found in North America. I think we all know what the other one is, the bald eagle, which is our national bird. But golden eagles are really a bird of the West. So they're mostly found in the Western United States, but they're also circumpolar. So they're found in the northern parts of Europe and Asia. And they are a bird that has had a really wide cultural influence. So that behavior he just did is called rousing. That's just a way of, it actually shows that he's comfortable. It's just a way of kind of arranging his feathers. So golden eagles, unlike bald eagles, are the national bird of over 14 different countries. They're found on the flag of 3 different countries. So this is a bird that has been revered and respected worldwide as a symbol of power and majesty. This bird was the emblem of the Roman war army. So they used this bird. They marched behind a flag that bore this bird when they went into battle. And so these guys have a long history with humans, and famously they're used a lot in Mongolia by native people there to hunt and capture food that the people eat. So they are used in the sport of falconry, but it's a lot of work to manage an eagle, as you can imagine. We obviously don't use Chris in that way. He, I think, is fine with that. He likes getting fed his food, and we'll take care of him for the rest of his life. So golden eagles, like all raptors, they have kind of a package of adaptations that really make them supreme hunters. And all raptors share what we call the 3 sharps. And I think a golden eagle is a great bird to look at the sharps and see these examples. As you might guess, the first sharp are these, huge talons. I don't know how well you can see the black part of his talons in the video, but they are quite large. If I kind of put my finger next to one, you can see his talon is almost as thick as my pinky finger. So they have an incredible gripping ability. So unlike many other birds that eat meat that will use their beak to catch and kill their prey, raptors use their feet. In fact, the word raptor comes from the Latin word raptore, which means to seize or to grab. And so that's really one of the most distinguishing characteristics of a raptor. And we talk about what makes a raptor. Well, hunting with their feet is a big part of that. And eagles are especially adapted, especially golden eagles, to hunt a lot of different kinds of things. Now, their favorite food by far is rabbits, especially in this part of the world. There have been studies of eagle nests where they look at prey remains, and nearly 70% of those prey remains over 30 years are some kind of rabbit. So that's always going to be their first choice if they can find it. But there's also been things as diverse as some of the larger songbirds and gopher snakes found in these nests, and things up to as large as mule deer fawn or pronghorn antelope fawns. So they can kill pretty large animals. But with that, there's kind of a myth that golden eagles are a problem for ranchers, that the golden eagles will kill sheep or other domestic livestock. So here he is playing with his leash game, like I mentioned, and he'll just pick that all the way off. But in that study, those 30-year studies, less than 1% of the food remains over 30 years were domestic sheep. So that's really, we can prove that that's kind of a myth. These guys are not really an economic impact on human activity. But as you learned from tonight, our human activity has a lot of impact on them. In addition to those really sharp talons, another one of the sharps that's pretty obvious is that bill. And he's giving you a great view of his bill right now. He has that sharp hooked bill. A lot of times people ask me if I'm worried about him biting me. And I can tell you, honestly, I certainly don't want that to happen. But his bite is not nearly as strong as his feet. So if I'm going to worry about something from him, I'm going to watch those talons because they have a lot more power than his bite. A bird like a parrot or not a crow, what's the bigger one? A raven. They have much stronger bite force than an eagle or most raptors do. So really that sharp beak is used by his neck muscles and his chest muscles to rip into his prey and kind of open up that hide and get into the soft, juicy bits that he likes so much. The third sharp for an eagle like this is something that you can probably have heard of is his vision. You've probably heard the term eagle-eyed or something along those lines. We generally use that term. I'm gonna see if I can zoom in to get a good close-up look at his, except for he's gonna dodge me. You can see his eyes are large, and they look large even from this perspective, but if you were to see an x-ray of the inside of his head, they're even bigger than they appear. So his eyes, rather than being a round ball like you would imagine a human eyeball or maybe a dog or some other animal, their eyes are actually tube-shaped and they're really deep. And so that gives them increased depth perception, which you can imagine if you are attacking out of the sky and flying down onto something that's as small as a rabbit, you want to know how close the ground is and how close the rabbit is. So that deep eyeball gives them better depth perception. And they also have about at least twice the number of vision receptors that we have in our human eyes. So the way I like to think about that, when you think about a digital picture, the more pixels in that picture, the bigger you can blow it up on your screen and have it still be clear and crisp. If you have a picture that doesn't have a lot of pixels, as you start to blow it up, it gets fuzzy and you lose some of that detail. So it's kind of like his camera or his eye has twice the number of pixels as our eyes. So he can see in really great detail. And that makes sense. If you're going to hunt from the sky, you have to be able to see things that are quite far away and in a lot of detail. Where their vision is really different than ours is that they actually don't have very good vision at night or after dusk. You're not going to see eagles like Chris hunting because their eyes are really adapted for the daytime. And those vision receptors are really meant for perceiving color and not shades of gray. They also, their vision, because it's so tuned into distance, they aren't the best at seeing things close up. So once you get pretty close to their face, they have a little bit of trouble. But usually by that point, they've got their talons in whatever they're hunting and are able to hold on to it so that it can't get away. One other, I think, really cool fact about golden eagles is that not only are they able to eat a diverse array of prey, they also use a lot of different hunting techniques. There's some raptors that are really known for a specific way of hunting, like a peregrine falcon, for example, is known to stoop out of the sky at really high speeds and go after a bird. So they hunt birds and they kind of hit it like a bullet and knock it out of the sky. Well, this golden eagle, not this one in particular, but golden eagles in general can do the same thing. They're actually the second fastest animal after the peregrine falcon and have been clocked at speeds of up to 200 miles an hour in a dive. So they'll use that same strategy that the peregrine falcon uses, but then they'll also use an ambush strategy. So sometimes they'll wait in the shadow of a cliff face or in a tree for something to come by, and then they'll ambush it. So they're pretty adaptable in what they hunt and the way that they hunt, which I think is really cool. I mean, bald eagles are great and they are America's bird, but to me, there's just something really special about golden eagles and their tactics. I think they're pretty clever as birds. I don't know if we want to.
We're starting to get some questions in about Chris.
I'd like to answer some questions.
So Linda says that Chris has a beautiful golden nape, and I think we can all agree. Are they born with that golden nape, or what age are they when those colors start to appear?
Yeah, so the golden nape actually comes in pretty early. A young golden eagle, one of the best ways to tell if an eagle is an adult or has its adult plumage, or if it is a young bird, is by the tail. So they'll have a really distinct white band at the base of their tail, so like the part that attaches to their body, and then the tip of their tail will have a black kind of stripe along it. They'll also sometimes, if in their wing pits here, will have a white patch when they're younger. So that's some of the ways to identify a younger bird. But the golden highlights that come on that nape and kind of on the edges of their wings here, those come in even before they are adults, get their adult plumage.
Lovely. We have a couple more about raptors generally and Chris, but first maybe we'll pass it back to Jess for just a second. So Jess, something that's come up several times in the chat has been other raptor species. So when you have been doing this work, are you only seeing eagles, or are you seeing other raptors that are also facing peril from cars and other vehicles?
Yeah, that's a great question. So while we're out there, we do everything. So any raptor that we see live or unfortunately dead, we do count and we do record. We see a lot of owls. I think that's probably the most of what we see. So great horned owls are a big one. In the last year, short-eared owls have been a pretty common one as well. But we'll also see bootios, so rough-legged hawks, Swainson's hawks, red-tailed hawks. A couple falcons too. We've seen prairie falcons, kestrels. So yeah, I mean, pretty much a very widespread of all raptors. Yeah.
Great. Well, that leads into my next question, which is also all raptor oriented. So Jordan would like to know if all raptors have tube-shaped eyes. Melissa, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, that's actually a pretty common feature of raptors. If you ever get a chance to see a skull or a replica of a raptor, you'll notice like the eye cavity goes really far back, and that also means that there's not a lot of room left over for brains. So I don't want to say that they're not intelligent birds, but they really are adapted to kind of do their thing. They're not super social, like some of the more intelligent birds tend to be more social and have bigger brains. So a lot of that skull space is taken up by eyes, and you can find that same shape of eye in most raptors. Yeah.
Awesome. And we're doing really great on time. So for those of you who've hung with us to the Q&A portion, really, if there's anything that's on your mind, feel free to drop it in the chat. We're happy to field that to Melissa or to Jess. Kind of a more technical question about the project, Jess. So someone asks, how do you approach property lines when moving carcasses? They work for the Washington State Department of Transportation, and often 200 meters would be outside our right of way, making moving carcasses that far challenging. 10 meters is possible and likely what that Department of Transportation does in most locations. And they also thank you for your work.
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. So it does vary by location and state to state, but yeah, so a right of way, I guess I should explain that to folks who maybe aren't familiar with the terminology. The right of way is the section of road that's like past the shoulder, basically. So there's like the white line and then up into the fence line. On a lot of highways, there'll be like a grassy area, or sometimes there's some vegetation there. And so that's what we consider the right of way. And most of our study occurs in up to 20 meters into the right of way, or shorter where the fence is closer. And in those areas where we're moving carcasses 200 meters, we do have to check ownership. So we do that on like BLM areas, and we have permits to do so. So we've yeah, wouldn't encourage just going out there and moving deer around. But yeah, so we have permits, and we have certain rules where we obviously wouldn't move it onto somebody's property. Yeah.
But I have to say, if you have that kind of dedication that you want to move a carcass, that's a big heart you have. Don't do it, but wow, good for you. That's someone who loves birds.
Love it. So when we're talking about eagles, Jess, you talked earlier about being a turbine sentinel. So we're kind of throwing it back a little bit. Someone was asking what that actually looks like. What do you do when you're a turbine sentinel?
Sure. So there's two parts to the job. One was sitting in a tower where it just had windows all the way around. There was also like a deck that wrapped around, and you just scan the skies and look for eagles. And then if you find them in this particular project, we would record the eagles, and we also had mechanisms to shut down the turbines if the eagles got too close. And then we also did carcass searches. So we would walk a predetermined pattern around below a turbine and record the carcasses that we found there.
Great. This one, Jess, I'm sure you could answer it. Melissa, I bet you have some thoughts on it as well, though, since you're an education director and know a lot about how birds interact. Do golden eagles and bald eagles share well, or do they fight over carcasses?
I mean, Jess will probably be able to speak specifically to carcasses. I think in nature there's competition for everything, right? Competition is one of the main relationships or interactions that drive ecosystem functions. So I don't know that I would say that they are good at sharing necessarily, but I do think that raptors, especially vultures, are better at tolerating other members of their species, or even just other types of birds on the carcass. But yeah, I don't know that it's like, I'll take this leg and you take that leg, but I think if there's enough food on it, I know I've looked at the videos or the camera images that Jess has shared with me it's not uncommon to see multiple birds on a carcass at the same time. And so I think that as long as everybody's getting something to eat, it's fine. But if that's not the case, then yeah, a lot of times one bird will chase the other one off. I don't know, as far as Jess can probably speak to like interspecies, like which species generally wins in those types of conflicts.
Yeah, I think it's very individually based. We've kind of seen it all over the map, whether or not, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you talked about how much food is available. I think that largely is going to dictate how willing they are to share it, is how hungry they are and how likely it is they're going to be able to find more food.
Yeah, definitely not a common thing to see raptors, working together to hunt. Although I'll put a little plug out there that if you follow us on social media tomorrow, you can hear a podcast where Dave Oliar talks about Harris's hawks, and they actually do work together to feed. So that's kind of a fun one. Let's see what else we have. Someone is working on their master's thesis on raptor collisions for Washington State highways. Really cool. And so they were just wondering if there were wildlife vehicle collision hotspots that emerged as a result of this as well.
Yes, there are. Yeah, if we pull up the map of where we found carcasses, there are definitely hotspots. And I don't know, we haven't done that in Washington specifically, but we have in the other states that they're part of our study area. And most of them, yeah, you can see like a very clear pattern where there's a much higher rate of things getting hit by cars in some areas.
Great. And one other question. So, I mean, in this study, obviously, we know that you all, the biologists who were working on this, are the ones who are responsible for, working with carcasses and things. But if Hawkwatch wasn't doing this work, Jess, who would be responsible for moving or removing carcasses? Like, how does this work?
Yeah, in a lot of areas, it's the Department of Transportation. And even though we are doing this work, we will see, we'll catch on camera, we'll have a camera on a deer, and then the Department of Transportation will come and they'll pick up that deer and put it in their truck and take it elsewhere. And there are some other organizations that do that as well, and other agencies. So there are people that do collect carcasses from the road or move them, and that varies state to state on what the rules are for either leaving them there or moving them around.
Great. We have just a few more minutes together, everyone. So if you have more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We have a couple more for you, Melissa. So first, why are you spritzing, Chris?
That's a great question. So eagles live outside. I don't know if that's surprising to anyone, but they live outdoors year round. And Chris, normally he lives in, we call it a mew, is what we call the sort of house that we keep birds in. His mew is outside. So he can get warm pretty easily. We just had a drive here in the car, and even though I had the AC blasting, sometimes I can tell he's getting a little bit warm. The fact that he's kind of holding his wings out to let the air circulate is a sign to me. If he opens his beak and his bill and kind of pants, that's a sign that he's getting warm. So I'm just trying to help control his temperature. His little naked feet are the best place to cool him down. So a lot of times I'll focus it on his feet because they evaporate quickly. The water evaporates and helps to cool him. So yeah, just keeping him cool.
And how do you tell how old Chris is, or any golden eagle, I guess, for that matter?
That's a great question. We know that Chris has been in captivity for at least 20 years. He had his juvenile plumage when he was hit, so we know approximately how old he is because we know how long that takes to happen. So he's probably around 24, 25 years old. But if he had been hit with his adult plumage, there's really no way to tell. It's just kind of a mystery. So sometimes it's a matter of behavior. You can tell sometimes a young bird, but most of the time, once they have their adult plumage, it's really impossible to tell. So we have some birds in our in our Raptor Ambassador collection that we know for sure because we got them during their hatch year or when they had their juvenile plumage. And we have some birds that we just don't know. So it can be difficult to age a bird. For example, we have a red-tailed hawk named Coloris, and we got him in 1992. He did have a red tail, so he had his adult plumage. So what we've been saying is we know he's at least 31 years old, which is pretty dang old for a red tail. And you can see that in his behavior now for sure. But for many years, you wouldn't know his age based on his behavior because they just have as time in there when they're kind of in their prime where it's just really difficult to tell.
All right, we have maybe the best question. They've all been great questions. Thank you all for all of the things you've asked our presenters. But someone asks, what can we do as raptor lovers to help minimize these strikes? So Jess, maybe this is a good note to end on.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, going through some of the stuff that I've talked today and just taking a lot of that into account and, certain things like if you see a deer on the side of the road to report that deer and hopefully, somebody would come move it, depending on the laws in the state that you're from. And yeah, being aware of that. Also, we should be aware of what's going on the roads when we're driving anyways, just to be aware of and knowing that there's animals. Like sometimes, you'll see like the deer crossing sign. And I think sometimes we see that so often that we just start to kind of, I guess, tune it out. But know that when there's a deer crossing sign, that's usually in an area that it's a hot spot. So there might be a lot of deer. And because of that, there might also be a lot of raptors in that area as well, and just keeping an eye out, watching your speed, driving the speed limit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Jess, is I think you have mentioned to me that the speed the car is going can have a really big impact on how much time that bird has to flush and get away. So if you're going 15, 20 miles over the speed limit in that area, that could definitely, I think, have a greater impact on the birds if they are flushing towards the road.
Yeah, someone in the chat earlier said that one of their favorite road signs is out west, and it says "Watch for eagles" in the area. And it'd probably be nice to have a few more of those. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Just starting to see some thank yous and keep up the good works coming in. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for making this possible. Without you all supporting our work, we would not be able to study eagle vehicle collisions. We would not be able to provide education programs with birds like Chris, and we wouldn't be able to continue educating folks about these issues. So thank you again, and thanks Melissa and Jess. Have a good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.